Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz, and today I have Catherine Auman, LMFT, with me today. Super excited. We're going to be talking all about Tantra, which is super fun. I took her workshop in the beginning of November, which was Tantra and the Psychedelics of Sex, which popped up on my Eventbrite feed the morning before it happened that night. I was super curious, so I signed on. I've dabbled a little bit in Tantra through the spiritual side with Raja Chaudhry, who does Awakening Your Kundalini and does the Tantra practice, and studied with Ananda Institute, the Raja Yoga, which comes from the Tantric lineage I just learned while attending the One World Tantra Festival hosted by Eugene Hudlin and many others that just ended the end of November. So fascinating. So I'm super excited to have Catherine with me today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Catherine Auman, LMFT, which is Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, is a spiritual psychotherapist and the director and founder of the Transpersonal Center in Los Angeles, California. She has advanced training in traditional psychology as well as the wisdom traditions. Catherine lived for a year at the Osho ashram in India, a full-time immersion in Tantra and meditation. And she has studied and practiced Tantra, love, sex, intimacy, and seduction with numerous teachers. Catherine, super excited to have you on the show.
And I am super excited to be here. Thanks for asking me, Liz.
Yeah. Great. So how about you share a little bit about your background? I know I just shared a little bit, but what was your journey to be teaching this?
Well, I started really about 30 years ago. I was in a bookstore and I saw a book called The Book of Secrets by Osho. He was then called Rajneesh of the Wild Wild Country fame. And I was just mesmerized by his eyes and the photo. And I started reading the Book of Secrets, which is all about Tantric philosophy. And Tantra was not a household name at that time, but I really resonated with that whole concept that sex is sacred. It just had always seemed that way to me, that there was something more going on than what we were told, and that there was something divine about it. And I just really always was a little bit outside the mainstream that way, being very curious. Sex seems spiritual. So I pursued that. Off and on, I went both routes, outside the mainstream route with Tantra, meditation, which used to be outside the mainstream. It's hard to imagine now, but going to Tantra workshops when there were only a few instead of a lot like now. And then also at the same time, I was kind of in the closet about all that because I was also pursuing this licensed psychotherapist because I just really wanted to be able to help the people who came to me. I just really wanted skills to be able to know what's really helpful. So I did both of those at the same time. And now later in life, I've been able to get out of the closet and just say, I do all of this.
Nice.
I do all of it.
So tell us a little bit about the history of Tantra, because in the sutras, out of 112 of them, only 5, are sacred sexuality. And as we all know, or maybe not all know, those were actually taken by an Englishman over to Europe. So why don't you give us a little bit of background and the difference between traditional and what's being called neo-tantra these days?
Sure. Tantra, everybody thinks immediately when they hear the word Tantra, they think sex, and they usually think weirdo sexual positions and stuff. And that is like probably about 5% of Tantra. It's obviously the most inflammatory and sells the most books and so on, but it is a very small portion. And it really goes back to the scholars are saying maybe as much as 6,000 years ago. Osho says that there are basically, if you boil all religions and spiritual traditions down, there's basically only 2, the yogic and the tantric. And these words today are interchangeable, but stay with me just for a sec. The yogic path would be all the ones where you have to do something to get to God or to evolve or to achieve enlightenment. So you have to eat a certain way and you have to follow these rules and you have to wrap yourself up into a pretzel. And yoga is great, but I'm just saying there's all these things you need to do. And so this would even boil down to New Age spirituality, where I don't know about up there on Vashon Island, but here in LA, it's like, this coconut water, you're more highly developed than this coconut water. It's like, it gets down to these levels of progression along a path, and some of the rules are kind of arbitrary. But anyway, the tantric tradition is that you don't have anything. Everything's already perfect. It's just that we're blind to that fact that everything's perfect. So if I can relax totally into this present moment, everything is perfect. It's hard for us to see this because our minds don't like this or that, or it's hard to figure out how genocide could be perfect, all these kinds of things that totally make sense. But this is that mindset. So if everything's perfect, then sex is also perfect. So when the early tantrikas were saying sex is perfect, this other people were like, they're into sex. It's like, well, we're just into sex like everything's perfect. Everything's sacred. Everything's sacred. They're saying sex is sacred. So that's where this whole split started in the way my understanding is. So they wanted to pleasure wrong. I don't know, but the religion I grew up in, pretty much if it felt good, it was bad. If you were having too much fun, if you were doing this and that, sex was only supposed to be done by married people, probably with the lights out, and even drinking coffee for some people is wrong, and all these kinds of traditions that certainly help lots of people. It's not a tantric philosophy. The tantric philosophy is, in this moment, if I really relax into it, it's super pleasurable, everything's perfect. And Tantra is practices, mindsets, experiences, breathing to get to that state of understanding that everything's unfolding perfectly as it should.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I love being able to bring sacred sexuality, into my life and kind of unwrap all of those negative belief systems, that we've inherently grown up with. Can you unwrap that a little bit more and how those belief systems can affect us?
Well, sure. There's so many. And like you say, some of the Tantra work is psychological and unwrapping some of these things, these ideas that, I talk about this in my seminars, that sex gets worse as you get older. People become less attractive as they get older. Sex deteriorates in a long-term relationship. You shouldn't, people are, especially women, are shut down. It's getting much better amongst the people we know, but certainly women are told not to say what they like or don't like. Mm-hmm. Men are taught that they are sex machines, sex animals, only want one thing. I have never met a man who only wants one thing. And I used to hang out, one of the unusual things about my resume is that I hung out with the guys who are pickup artists and took a lot of training on how to do pickup, because in my quest to understand sex, love, and romance, I felt like I'm too shy. I don't even know how to go up and talk to a man I find attractive. So I went into the den there of all these womanizers and just wanted to learn how they approach people. And it's actually very helpful. I recommend it to women. But anyway, even those guys, of course, they're looking to fall in love. Everyone's looking to fall in love. So all of these prejudices, these ideas we have about sex, this idea that orgasm is supposed to be the crowning achievement of sex, the idea that we should always do it in the same order. We should always do foreplay, she comes, he comes, it's over. This kind of, at least that's better than when it used to be, it didn't matter if she came, but it's still this formula that gets very boring. So all these kinds of ideas we try to unwrap. We try to unwrap prejudices that women have against men, that men only want one thing, the prejudices that men have against women, that it only matters how they look. All these kinds of things we unwrap in Tantra workshops to help us get so we can really sit with another human being in love, whether we're in love with them or not.
Right.
So we have a lot of unwrapping. I just did a video for my YouTube channel on confronting our internal ageism, because of the ageism of the culture, we find ourselves less attractive as we get older. And we are not in my estimation, people get more attractive as they get older. As I've cleansed my own eyes, I used to think it was terrible to get older too, but as I really worked on this in myself and with some of my patients, I realized I don't think my eyes do not see people as getting less attractive anymore as they get older. I see the wisdom, the experience, the sense of humor, the relaxation. And if people have kept their bodies alive and work to raise their consciousness, they become wildly attractive with a radiance that younger people, I'm sorry, just don't have.
Right. And I think that really is a cultural thing, how women start to not feel valid when they reach a certain age, and then men start dating younger women, which,
Because we've all heard this thing that in France or Italy, the sexy, hot older woman. And we haven't had that much here. It's getting a little bit better, but
Mhm.
until we change it on the inside, it's not going to really change on the outside. Actually, statistically, of course, there are men who like younger women, but nobody's counting the men who prefer older. When they actually do studies, they found out that the vast majority of men prefer a woman around their own age. So
Nice.
this cultural stereotype constantly being blasted with that men only want younger women is actually in practice not true.
That's
It's actually
fantastic
not
and
true.
good to hear. I
Certainly there
feel
are
great.
men. Yeah, so there
Love my
certainly are
40s.
men. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. There certainly are men, you were saying.
There certainly are men with that fetish, but who cares about them? Who cares? They can have their fetish. Doesn't bother me. I was single for working really hard at it for a while, and it's like, those are not my men. It's okay.
Yes. And I personally felt great in my 40s. My 50s are awesome. It just keeps on getting better and better, I think.
And it can keep getting better.
Yes. Awesome. So let's go into Tantra as a comparison between this goal-oriented, performance-based, sex that we're used to, and unwrapping Tantra and what it can bring into our sexual lives.
Oh, that's great. It's one of my favorite topics. I made a card, an info card for that workshop on how do you compare conventional sex and tantric sex. And one of the main things is that conventional sex, we're taught that the goal is orgasm for both the men and women, and that's when it's over. And this idea actually was only propagated by the Masters and Johnson back in the 70s. Not that there haven't been people that have seen sex that way, but that fact that became the whole cultural, that's just the way it is sort of idea actually started back then, recently as that. The tantric worldview is orgasm is, but that's not the goal. In fact, we often choose not to have orgasms because we would rather get on what we could call an orgasmic wave. That's like a wave that's going on in the universe all the time. And if you just can get on that orgasmic wave and not orgasm, that can last for hours and hours and hours, and actually probably never stops, but we just get tired and we are like exhausted. And that is what we find far more pleasurable than orgasm. Orgasm-based sex does get boring. In my experience and from what I've read about, it's just the same thing over and over. And this is probably why people get bored with conventional sex, because it's like, we're doing that thing again. I've had so anyway, so it's that you drop the goal. And when you drop that goal of orgasm, so most conventional sex is every touch that I give to my partner, I'm trying to get them towards this goal. And when first I started experimenting with, if we're not trying to get to that goal, how are we being together? It's a totally radical, different. Every touch is different. The experience of every touch, if I'm not trying to get you to a higher state of pleasure, it's like apples and oranges. And it becomes this entire different way of relating where what's important, the goal, you could say, it's not a goal. What is important in that moment is my connection with my partner. Our connection, that's where the sacred thing is, that third thing. So we've all heard this sort of thing, 1 + 1 = 3. That third thing is that utterly divine spiritual connection where our egos aren't there. We're just there in this cosmic bliss together. And that is more likely to come when you practice being in that meditative moment, which if we, a lot of the great teachers will tell us in this moment, just keep being the power of now. Let's just be in this moment. And so we try to bring that sort of meditative consciousness to sex, of just being in this moment, not in the future when we're going to come, not in the future when we're going to have are we going to have the biggest orgasms ever? Oh no, it was disappointing. We're not trying to go there. We're just trying to be here, present, feeling the perfection of this touch right now. That is immensely amazing. It changes everything. And then you, so practice as you're doing meditation. So most meditation has to do with, oh, I started thinking about lunch. I'm going to come back and be here right now. Oh, I started thinking about my project. Oh, I started criticizing myself. Well, those are just thoughts. I'm just going to come back to this present moment. So the same thing, Osho said, meditators have the greatest sex because we practice that meditative attitude in life. We practice perhaps meditation. Then we bring that to the bedroom. So if I'm with my husband and we are starting to make love and I start thinking about something, oh, back to the present. Where are our skins touching? Oh, it's so exquisite. Well, now I start thinking about the thing I have to do tomorrow. Oh, back to the present where our skins are touching. And this, after a certain amount of time, the mind will actually realize that it's not invited. So it will it will move to the back seat of the car, and then you can just float in this sensual bliss with your partner in a way that conventional sex doesn't offer. It's great because I like to make this joke that meditators sit, facing a wall and closing their eyes and being alone and lonely and so on. And great, that's helped many, many people. But tantrikas meditate by making love. Oh, that's my choice. I like that a lot better.
I like that too. And you can bring in, with that sexual meditation, manifestation, which I find very fascinating.
So what do you mean by that?
The practice of manifesting things in life through our sacred sexuality. Do you teach at all on that or have any information?
Well, I actually I don't, but I have noticed that when you start raising your frequency in this way, when you start living in love, when you start living, there's nothing wrong with goals, but without goal-oriented sex, without goal-oriented this in this moment. I mean, I have a new book I want to finish and so on. But when we can stay in this moment with the process, and when we start allowing our bodies to live in more pleasure and more awareness of the sacredness of life, I think life manifests as it does to a person who is expecting life to be full of more bliss. So I don't really, I know some people target on certain things they want, and I just feel like I already have everything I want. If more comes, that's fine. If it doesn't, I'm fine too, because this moment is just utterly blissful. So I think that that when we talked before, when you asked me about the conditioning of the conventional world, one thing that they're conditioning us is against living ecstatic lives. And Margot Anand, one of the great teachers of Tantra, calls them the anti-ecstasy forces. I love that phrase.
Oh, I like that.
So she's always like, beware of the anti-ecstasy forces. They don't want you to be too happy, because if you're really, really happy, you won't buy anything. So they want you to always continually be unhappy and need to buy more stuff. So you just want to notice where in your life you are being shut down, your natural exuberance. You look at dogs, they're just like so happy. Today's the best day of their life.
Right.
And actually, we're like dogs. Today's the best day of my life, but the mind is always telling me why it's not, because it's, I didn't win the lottery today and it's raining and it sucks. And it's like, it doesn't really suck, but the mind will tell us it does.
Unfortunately, yes. And I like the previous outlook much better.
More fun.
Yes.
But it is a discipline to get there. I don't mean to minimize or say that it's not years and years of effort, years and years of cutting away what is not us. I was in therapy for decades and personal growth work for decades, and confronting my messages I got from my parents, messages I got from the culture that have not been helpful, spiritual search, spiritual disciplines, trying things, finding out what worked, what didn't, body awareness. So it's a journey. It's a
Yeah,
journey.
same
But as I
here.
like to tell people, it's when you get there, it's like everything was worth it. Everything.
Yes, it is a journey and a continuous journey because you're unwrapping and unraveling and peeling away the layers. And as we age and we reach these new decades, and we're almost spiraling around and unwrapping something new, a different perspective on what we were working on, say in our 30s, 40s, 20s also.
Well, that's another one of the big lies, because if you are really a person working on yourself, life gets better and better and better. And they're telling you it gets worse. And it doesn't. I was just thinking this morning, the only thing that I think is different about being my age and when I was younger, the actual only thing is that it takes longer to heal from a sports injury.
Yes.
But other than that, everything else in my life is better than it ever was. And no one told me that that was even a possibility.
Yeah, no one told
Told me
me
that was
either.
even possible.
Mhm.
And they just tell you it gets worse, and they tell women their faces are getting ruined and aging and this and that. And it's like, no one ever tells you that the possibility is that life could get better and better and better, and sex could get better and better and better. My husband and I are in our 60s. We're having the best sex we've ever had. We've both been sexual people all our lives. It's not like we suddenly discovered it. It's like it keeps going to deeper and deeper levels. And my spiritual master says, you have until your last breath to evolve. So I'm planning on taking advantage of that.
Nice. You broke up just a little bit. Can you say the end of what your spiritual teacher said one more
He
time?
said, you have until your very last breath to evolve.
There we go.
And I plan on taking advantage of that.
Yes, me too. It's a beautiful journey. I'm really enjoying it. And I will, my last breath, definitely. So in the workshop that I took from you, Tantra and the Psychedelics of Sex, you also talked about Transcendent Sex. Can you unwrap that for us a little bit?
Yes, there was a book I read years ago by Dr. Jenny Wade, who is a transpersonal psychologist. And she wrote this book called Transcendent Sex, and she she does serious research at a prestigious university. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one. She put out a research question. So this was not a cross section of people. This was just people who chose to answer the call. She said, have you ever had transcendent sex experiences? And a lot of people wrote in and they reported amazing things. They reported channeling entities. They reported seeing lights and fireworks, which sounds corny, but actual fireworks, being met by alien beings, turning into animals, like shape-shifting, sense of oneness, speaking in tongues, just all kinds of experiences that came through sex and not asked for, very surprising. And some of these experiences were frightening and some were overwhelmingly blissful. So she compiled this as a starting point for, what's going on here. And I had read that, and I was thinking about these tantric sex experience my husband and I had been having, where we were on the tantric orgasm for 6 or 7 hours. And I started putting together this talk that I give about what are the similarities between a psychedelic experience, sexual experience, how you can kind of get psychedelic, how you can be in psychedelic type states through sex, drugs, or how drugs can affect sexual experience, kind of drawing some similarities between those two.
Great. Can we unwrap it? Go ahead.
And then I just had some preliminary suggestions for people who want to start where you can't make transcendent sex happen. As far as I know, you can't, we were at a Tantra seminar once where this woman, we were being told that a certain practice would take about 2 hours. And this woman goes, I don't have 2 hours. Can we have the hack? And I don't think there's a hack for transcendent sex. Maybe taking psychedelic drugs, maybe MDMA or something. But as far as what we've been able to discover, and again, I haven't find too much research on this, is that there needs to be space and time like you would make for a psychedelic experience. There needs to be complete trust with your partner. Most partners don't have complete trust. So my husband and I teach some workshops where we talk about how to get to that state of complete trust. I know I never had complete trust with any of my previous partners.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be a sense of inviting the divine, not going for the goals, as we were talking about earlier, not going for the goal of transcendent sex, but being open to what the universe might want to gift you with. Being open and inviting. And to be open and inviting in sex is actually kind of frightening to the ego, or to our sense of limitation, or to our sense of what's possible for us. Intimacy can be very frightening. So all of these things, it's beautiful for a person on a personal and spiritual growth path, because it brings up right there, where's my cutting edge of growth? Oh, I'm afraid to go a little bit further. Oh, that's what I can work on. That's where I can relax and open. That's where my barriers are to more ecstasy and bliss. Oh, I can breathe into that. And I can do it in the presence of someone who loves me. I don't have to run off and, I'm a therapist, so you can do it in my office, but I don't have to run off to the therapist's office and hide and talk about this stuff. If I trust my partner enough, we can just be here and talk about my edge of pleasure. I'm scared to go further. Let's just be here together with that. And notice that if we continue to open and open, that's where more and more bliss is. More pain too. We have to be willing to open to that as well. It's all about opening, I think, opening to love.
Wonderful. I know many would want to take that journey. And you mentioned safety around sex, and it is a very vulnerable space.
Definitely.
And a lot of times unwrapping those relational issues, where a person doesn't feel safe sexually, I think is very important.
Yeah, what we found is, and what a lot of what we teach is that most couples don't have great sex lives, the sex lives they want, because there's so much baggage between them that's been shoveled under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really want to talk about that. And, in my life, I'm not like that now, because I see that all of that unspoken stuff creates a climate of not safety. And we can't bring that up. We can't talk about that. We can't, we're not really like that. If I bring that up, it'll cause an explosion. All these things that happen in the daily life of couples, we try to help get that stuff talked about, cleaned out, create a clear channel of energy between the two people, and that shows up in the bedroom and in the sex life.
That's great. I also think that people don't realize that blame, shame, and judgment, that happens outside of the bedroom filters into the bedroom.
Completely. Thanks for bringing that up. Completely. Because you cannot be your free sexual wild self if you're feeling shamed, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So clearing that in your own self, your own, like we said earlier about our own internal ageism, clearing your own shame that your body is aging, or maybe you think it's quite sexy and beautiful that it is. I told my husband, I said, this is really weird. My eyes have changed, but when I see like on your stomach where it's getting a little older, I said, it's weird. I find it really sexy. He goes, I find it sexy on you too. So we need these attitudes to the mainstream culture a little bit, that bodies are doing wonderful, weird things, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's less attractive or ugly or whatever we've been told it is. It can actually be very sexy because it's very alive.
Yes. Wonderful. I love that. That's great.
We weren't expecting that one, but it was a great treat.
That's awesome. So let's unwrap a little bit of the breathing and techniques that you use with Tantra.
Great. Most of it is dropping down into the body, because we have been taught that it's normal to live as a head, walking around assessing everything. And the body is kind of this thing that's coming along with us. That's kind of a problem. Isn't shaped right. It's kind of doesn't have abs, and the boobs are uneven, and my dick's not big enough, and all these problems we have, and it's not energetic enough, and now our digestion isn't right. All these things, it's just kind of a problem. And so we don't really want to live there. And I thought that I had a lot of body consciousness before I went to the ashram in India, because the Tantra ashram, because I worked out and I did tried to do more clean eating, and I was a dancer and I did yoga, and I thought I'll have body consciousness. And when I got to the ashram, I realized those are all things I've been doing to my body. I'm not actually living in it. My consciousness is not in my body. I'm always trying to manipulate my body to do something. And that was sexually too. You're trying to manipulate your body into becoming an orgasm machine. And there's nothing wrong with learning how to have orgasms, especially for women who have never had them. That's a journey that I went on earlier. But later on, like many areas of mastery, what you learn early on, you have to drop later on. So anyway, treating your body sexually as something that needs to perform, something that needs to do this and that, it needs to have, here's how to have bigger orgasms, and so on. And now I need to squirt, and all these ideas about what we want to make the body do. And in Tantra, it's more like, let's get rid of all that and actually see if we can drop my consciousness down into the body. So one thing Osho said is, imagine yourself as a headless person. This is really helpful to me. Think of myself walking around like the headless horseman without a head. And then my consciousness drops down more into my heart. And apparently a lot of Eastern traditions, they see that the center of the body is actually down around the belly, and that there's actually a seat of consciousness in the belly, which makes me laugh, because that's like the dinosaurs had another brain in their in their abdomen. So we're kind of like dinosaurs. We don't have the head telling us what's going on. We're feeling into our experience. So when you're actually in the body, you can feel, just like dogs. You know, dogs, like somebody comes into the room and they sniff to see if you're safe or not. Well, we actually have that capacity. I think about this with the Me Too movement. We're so cut off that we kind of go, oh, that person doesn't seem safe, but I'm going to go anyway. Or I think most people can talk about a lousy relationship they got into earlier in their life, where some little voice said, that person isn't safe, but they're so cute, I'm going to go for it. You know? And if we were really listening to the body, we would go, just like a dog, not going there. I don't care how cute you are. I don't care how good you look on my resume. Not a safe person. We would have much better sex, relationships, and see who and what is safe. So a lot of it is breathing. Let the breath come deeper into the body. We're taught to breathe very shallowly and very rapidly, and that's not a relaxed breath. Excuse me. So a relaxed breath, excuse me, goes deeper into the body, and that's what we're trying to do with breathing exercises, bring our consciousness more into the body. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Bad timing.
It happens. Sorry.
Can you talk for a minute?
Sure. So Catherine's just gonna take care of herself for a second right here. And I'm gonna entertain you guys while she takes care of that. So really interesting talk. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you are too. How you doing, Catherine?
Sorry, I'm fine.
That's okay.
Just what you don't want to have happen.
So, okay.
Where were we? We're talking about breathing and getting the
Yeah.
breath into the body. Tantric exercises. So basically, even without taking a Tantra class, you can, in this moment, envision yourself with your head cut off and your breath coming down further, just dropping further than it usually goes. We don't try to force. We don't try to do some big yoga thing. We just become aware of what it is and see if it wants to open a little bit more. In this moment, what if I drop my breath a little bit more into my body? And this starts for most people a connection with their bodies that's going to show up in the bedroom, in life, in relationships, in your own pleasure, your own capacity for pleasure. It's just the start of an amazing journey. Even just to realize that I'm not actually in my body, I have a body. And I would like that to become holistic. I'd like to be a body mind. This starts us out on a wonderful journey.
Yes, beautiful. And it's so much different when you come into your body, when you're aware of your body. And that meditation, like you said, does help because you get in the practice of like up drifting, bring it back, bring it back. Then when you're in your sexual experience and you find yourself drifting occasionally, you bring it back to your skin.
Exactly. What I've learned is that a focus on that point of contact where my partner's touching, where my partner's skin is touching my skin. And if I keep that awareness, come back to that point of awareness, it's not just focus. Some more conventional sexual techniques talk about focusing on your own pleasure, which can be fine. It's better than focusing on baseball scores, but it's not inclusive of the partner. So it can be a little bit just me. And I want to be focusing on the connection, the divine connection. I think that's what everyone's very hungry for.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too. And being able, the eye gazing where you're staring into your lover's eyes or you're feeling their skin on your skin, all very important moments for making that connection. How can we?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
That's one thing that we do practice in workshops, and most Tantra workshops will have a section where you gaze into each other's eyes. And in India, we used to go around in a circle and we'd look in each other's eyes for 20 minutes. And it was just like everyone would be sobbing because you cannot look really deeply into another person's eyes without falling in love with them. It doesn't matter who they are. You see their soul, you see their humanity, you see their vulnerability. You start seeing how you would have judged this person for not being some cultural ideal of what the culture has decided is beautiful. It breaks your heart to think, oh my God, I used to see them that way, and now I see their soul and I'm in love with them. It's a tremendous experience to be able to do that. Now, you don't have to do it for 20 minutes. In my workshops, I have people do it for 1 minute and they're freaking out because they've never really just shared an eye gaze with another person for 1 minute, but it's to share that, first of all, to open your eyes and let someone deeply look in, or to look deeply into someone else. It's the soul is there.
Yeah.
And some sort of divine connection happens there. As most people in the audience probably know, when they've shared that with a lover, that's when you just fall in love. It's a very powerful thing that we've been given, this ability to just stop, be with each other, look in each other's eyes, and the heart will break open. Love is there. We don't usually call that love. We have to fall in love with someone who looks a certain way, looks like Prince or Princess Charming. It's really, if you can just sit down. This was my third book, was called Tantric Dating, which is dating with the ability to just sit down with anyone. It doesn't have to be your future partner, and just share an eye gaze and fall in love. People are so afraid to fall in love with somebody if they're not going to marry them. But in India, we would just, when I was in these Tantra groups, we would just fall in love with each other. And it wasn't about whether or not you meet my criteria. It was like, I've seen in your eyes, I know who you are, I feel love for you.
Yes.
And that is a world that I would like to live in, is where more of us are in the frequency of all that other stuff. It's fine. It's interesting. We all enjoy looking at a good looking person, but when you fall in love with everybody, your idea of who's good looking gets really expanded. It's not just the people who belong in advertising. It's like, wow, most people are good looking.
Yes.
It's just full of this beautiful world. So
yes, beautiful minds and hearts and souls out there. And I love that, being in the frequency of love. That's wonderful.
Yes.
So let's talk about your book a little bit, Tantric Dating, Bringing Love and Awareness to the Dating Process. Can you share a little bit about
Yes, I would love to. I had that experience at the Tantra ashram. We were all in love with each other. And then I came back to the West and tried to enter the OkCupid, Bumble dating world, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't really put that together with being a spiritual person, and I a lot of good to it because you go on there and you see how many attractive people there are, and this whole shopping metaphor, though, it just was, I couldn't figure out how to put it together. So I decided I had a certain birthday, and I decided I'm going to find the love of my life. And I was too old, according to the conventional wisdom, and, you know, not the standard kind of beauty, just an average kind of person. And I just thought, a lot of people were saying, oh, brother is going to find love. And I decided I was going to do it no matter what. And I set out, it took me 3.5 years, and I found the love of my life, or he found me, however that works. And if I hadn't put that 3.5 years of solid labor in, I wouldn't have found him. I had to really work on myself. I had to get rid of ideas I still had, like I just shared about my own unattractiveness, which I no longer have. I studied pickup with pickup artists. I read books. I went back to therapy and so on. And I kind of distilled this into my book called Tantric Dating. It's a little book. It's an easy read. But it's, I think it's all people need to know. I've had people have had kind of life-changing experiences from it, they've told me, because it's about, we don't realize that the dating world, as the conventional world has set it up, is very unloving. It's like, if you don't look a certain way, you are crap to me, you know? You are, we even laugh at people. Oh my God, this guy, oh, he's so this and that. It's very unloving. And so we're trying to find love by being unloving. This doesn't compute. It took me a while to figure this out. It's like, so I would go on these dates. I went on 150 first dates, and then second dates and third dates during this time. And certainly I thought, this is ridiculous, not going to happen. And I started noticing, how can you find love when you're in an unloving frame? How can you find love when you go home and laugh with your girlfriends about what a creep this was? How can you find love when you're judging people on their looks, their financial status, their this and that, instead of things that really matter, like, are they kind? Do they ever spend time or energy on charity? Or do they, have they taken care, do they have a pet? Do they take care of things? Do they have any kind of spiritual life? We're not taught to look for that. It's like, here's your shopping list. Does he meet your shopping criteria? So it's this whole consumerist mentality, instead of, I'm overflowing with love, and who is going to come into this frequency. So I wrote this book about raising our own frequency, starting to see everyone as lovable, and doing this, changing my own dating habits into more this tantric perspective. Someone better than my wildest dreams ever showed up. So I wanted to share that. I was teaching, before COVID, I was teaching a tantric dating workshop once a month in Hollywood, where singles could come together, actually experience that by doing some tantric exercises, like looking in each other's eyes, feeling the radiance of the person, a little bit of teaching about what we're talking about now, and several relationships that I know of. I don't know how many that I don't know of came out of that, with people saying, this is a great way to meet people. So we just look at ourselves if we're still single. I had to do this. It was painful. I had to realize the reason I haven't met any, most of the guys I met were kind of half loving towards me. And I had to realize I'm half loving. I think I'm a loving person. I have friends. I have a cat. I give money to charity. I wasn't really completely. I wasn't as loving as the person I was hoping to attract. So there's your law of manifestation. If I want to attract somebody loving, I have to be more loving. Mm-hmm. So that was my process of learning to become a more loving person. And then I could attract love instead of half love.
Nice. And I love how you use the mirroring, as a self-reflection to open yourself up more to love.
Yeah, if I'm attracting guys that I'm saying are womanizers or just creeps or just interested in younger women, if I'm attracting only men that I think are interested in younger women, what do I think about myself? Mm-hmm. Because when I got really clear on, I don't believe this cultural nonsense about women get less attractive as they get older. I used to fall into it. I was like, oh, no one wants to date me because I'm older. As soon as I worked that out of my system, I started dating men from 28 to 68.
Nice.
And age was no longer an issue for me. So what showed up was no longer an issue. In
That's-
fact, the 28-year-old was begging me to be my boyfriend. And I said, no, that's just not going to work. But that's what can happen. And he was it was not some, he was a pretty decent guy, master's degree, all this stuff. And that's what can show up when you heal yourself. So you talk about mirroring, you heal your internal self, and then what shows up in the world is much, much different. Those guys never showed up when I thought I was less attractive because I was an older person.
Isn't it amazing how that works?
Now, since I think I'm more attractive than I've ever been, I walk down the street and guys will be getting my attention. And I'm like, really? Do you know how old I am? But that happens when you're on the inside radiating, have radiance.
Yes. Beautiful, Catherine. And what other workshops are you doing now?
We are
That's the
starting a
mindset.
series. We have a couple of workshops that we've had to take, of course, all our workshops online. So
Mhm.
it used to be day long. We have one that's been pretty successful called Tantra, the Science of Creating Your Soulmate. So soulmates are sort of this idea that they're going to drop from heaven or something. And it's like, no, actually we create soulmates by our work on ourselves and our work on the relationship. So we use some tantric principles of embodiment as things we've been discussing in this podcast about raising our frequency of love. If we really want love with our partner, we have to become more loving. It's not up to me, not up to him or her to be more loving. I have to raise my own frequency on that. Talking things through, a lot of the points we've been talking about so far. And then we have the companion to that is Tantra, the Foundations of Conscious Touch, because to even get to some of those wilder, famous tantric principles, you can just do them, but it's not going to make any difference if you don't get into this meditative, conscious, mindful touch. So we do an workshop on that. And then in January, we're launching what's called the intimacy teachings, which is going to be those two and a couple more. So my partner, Greg, and I, since we came together and we had this amazing connection and had worked so long on ourselves to be able to come together and find each other, we wanted to share with other people how, first of all, that relationships like ours are possible. Because I have many people say to me, do you really know people in good relationships? I want to say, yes, we do. We do. We have one. We created it. And we wanted to share not only that there are great relationships, but here's how you can create one in your own life as a spiritual person. One of the things I forgot to mention about how I first got into Tantra is I had read some books, but I went to this party. I was probably in my late 30s or early 40s. And I went to this party and there was this older couple and they were just the radiance coming out of them. They were the most alive people I'd ever seen. And I was like, who are you guys? What do you have? What do you know? I want to have what you're having. I want to learn what you know. And they were Tantra people. And that's when I first saw that these older people with this radiance as a couple, that's what I wanted. Whatever they were doing, I wanted that.
That's awesome. Yes. Hoping in my years ahead that's the same for me.
You're on your way.
Yes. And you also have a book, Guide to Spiritual LA. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's my newest book. I set out, first of all, my friends in other cities are like, why would you live in LA? It's so superficial. And, especially people in the Bay Area hate Los Angeles. And it's just, and I'm like, because it's a really spiritual place. You're like, what? Even people who live here don't know. So I just, people think I did so much research. Actually, the whole thing was fun for me. I would just really great places here where there's very strong Shakti outpouring, as strong as I ever felt in any of these holy places in India. So we have like where Paramahansa Yogananda started his whole empire here. And he's the one that wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, and Steve Jobs read his book yearly and so on. Yeah,
Yes.
affected millions of people worldwide. So he came here and started it all.
Mhm.
And then we have, just this wild cast of characters. Some of them are very eccentric and some of them are more mainstream, but we have Amy Semple. In the back of the book, I have the list of the top 10 spiritual badass women. We have Amy Semple McPherson, who started the Foursquare Church, and she was like sexy and she was this great showman. She would put on these Pentecostal revivals where she'd have the devil chase her around the stage with a pitchfork and so on. And she faked her own. I mean, there's just these amazing stories. Pentecostalism started here. You think it started in the deep South, but it actually started in a little house here in LA where this Black preacher was preaching and somebody started speaking in tongues and the radiance came out of this house and people all over LA could feel it and they were drawn to this place and they were celebrating in the streets, like 2,000 or 3,000 people in the streets, and they were dancing up and down on the porch and the porch filled up the house.
That's awesome.
And you can still go there and feel some of the radiance. I mean, it's just amazing here in Los Angeles where you think you have, the profane and the sacred. It's like you have these amazing. So I put together this book. I went around, took snapshots of everything and put it together. And I'm hearing that it's a fun read and it's easy because it's just little blips you read here. You don't have to read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's little tours you can take when we can go out and about again. So it's really fun to put together and I hope people like it.
That's fun. Great. Yeah, you got a lot of great reviews on it. It looks like a fantastic book.
Thanks.
Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
I think that if you are attracted to this tantric path, you don't need to wait for the next tantra workshop. You can just start, as we said, just wherever you are. You can just see if your breath wants to deepen a little bit. See if you want to feel in your feelings what you're feeling. If you're feeling your chair, if you're feeling the air, if you're feeling your lover's hand on your thigh, just tune into that. Tune into what's right. Doesn't mean becoming a positive thinker, because sometimes that can be forcing ourselves to do what we don't want to do, but we just focus on how is that feeling with a sense of curiosity. Just curious about what happens if I breathe a little deeper. Oh, there's where it stops and doesn't want to go any deeper. What's going on there? Interesting. Do I want my lover to massage that? Do I want to massage it myself? Interesting. So you can just start this tantric exploration anytime, and the more enjoyment will follow.
Yes. And how do people reach you, Catherine?
You can go to my website or YouTube. I have a bunch of YouTube videos on there. Facebook. My Instagram is a little bit weak. So anyway, it's CATHERINEAUMAN on any of those social media platforms or my website. And also, as you found me on event, also we've got meetups in several cities. So because everything's online now, so we can meet online or send me an email, however you'd like to be in contact. I would love that.
Great. I highly recommend it. It was a fantastic workshop.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciated it. Very eye-opening, and you dove into a lot of different aspects. I really appreciated it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you everyone for joining me today. Again, this is Liz on Raise the Vibe with Liz, and have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.